this is John Sadak, TV voice of the Cincinnati Reds, and you're up for Late Night Reds Talk.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into Late Night Reds Talk Live, part of the Believe Podcast Network, sponsored as always by our friends at Bet Online. We are so excited to have you with us tonight as we continue our series previewing each of the National League Central teams with the Cardinals. Tonight, we have got Katie Wu with us. She is the beat writer for the Cardinals and the Athletic. But before we get to that, Carlos, I hear a rumor that the Cincinnati football team is playing in the NFL semifinals. Is that correct?
That's confirmed, sir.
Okay, so I checked over at Bet Online, and they have the Bengals as 7-point underdogs. Carlos, can the Bengals cover the 7-point spread?
If I was betting right now, I would say yes, but I feel like I'd probably change my mind.
All right. Well, if you are with Carlos, head on over to the new updated and mobile website with Bet Online and sign up today and receive a 50% off welcome bonus for your first deposit. Just use our promo code BLEAV to get started. That is BLEAV. All right. We are excited to have Katie Wu on with us tonight. Katie, how are you doing?
I'm good, as good as it can be for a January Monday night with maybe some optimism about baseball, maybe not. We don't know. Yeah, all things considered, I'm okay. How are you?
Yeah, doing good. Thank you so much for coming on and continuing our preview. Before we jump into the Cardinals, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got to St. Louis, all that kind of stuff.
Sure. Well, I just finished my first year with St. Louis. This is my first year as an MLB beat writer, first year working for The Athletic, all of that good stuff. I graduated from college in 2018 and had just did a variety of internships in baseball, from Major League Baseball to minor league baseball, and found an incredible opportunity in February with The Athletic. I was living in California at the time, had never been to St. Louis, probably couldn't even find it on a map. Not that good at geography. And it just kind of seemed like the opportunity to go for it. And I'm so glad I did. It was a whirlwind of a year. I learned a lot. And I'm just more excited than anything to continue doing it.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, before we jump into the Cardinals, let's kind of update Reds fans where the Cardinals are at. Probably should issue a trigger warning before we post these slides. If you're watching, might be a little traumatic, but here we go. So Cardinals, we all know they've been great since 2000. They have the second best win percentage, second most playoff appearances, and second most playoff series wins in MLB, only behind the Yankees. If you're watching, you see all the trophies. Cardinals have won 10 NL Central titles since 2000. Cubs are at 6, Brewers are at 3, Reds are at 2, and thank God for the Pittsburgh Pirates at 0. Last season, Cardinals opened the season with a wild series, actually in Cincinnati. If you remember, the Cardinals did win the first game. Then the Reds won 2 of the next 2. Katie, I believe that was your first series covering. What a way to get started.
Very eventful.
Wild series. Cardinals got off to a great start on the season. 25-18 record, 3.5 games up on May 19th. But it went downhill in June. The Cardinals went 10-17, kind of fell out of the NL Central races. The Brewers just kind of blew everyone out in the division. Cardinals had a weird trade deadline. They acquired J.A. Happ and John Lester. I remember, reading Cardinals fans were definitely not happy at the trade deadline. It kind of felt like just a move just to kind of finish out the season with arms. I'm sure we'll get into more of that with Katie in a minute. And then on September 10th, Reds were looking good. Reds beat the Cardinals 4-2. We're up 3 games on the Cardinals. Cardinals odds were down to 2% at some point around there. And then the Cardinals won 17 in a row and broke everyone's hearts in Cincinnati. See, if you're watching, you see the graph. It's not pretty. But the Cardinals did lose in the wild card game. Chris Taylor hit a walk-off home run. But the Cardinals' wild season did not end there. They fired Mike Schilt, which was pretty shocking, pretty much shocked the baseball world. and they brought in Ali Marmol. That is correct. That's how you say it, Katie, right? Ali Marmol, not Oliver.
Straight up Ollie, like Oliver.
Okay.
Ollie Marmol.
Ali Marmol. We'll talk about him in a minute. And then so far in the offseason, the Cardinals have signed Steven Matz, and then they brought back 90-year-old Yadier Molina and 95-year-old Adam Wainwright. So that is where the Cardinals stand right now. First, Katie, I want to ask you about Mike Schill, because I'm sure that's probably what most Reds fans are most interested about. So the Reds, they collapsed in September. Not really David Bell's fault, but he gets an extension after the Reds collapse. The Cardinals have this historic, incredible run, and Mike Schill gets fired. So what's going on there?
Well, yeah, it was definitely a very peculiar situation, to put it nicely. After the Cardinals' historic 17-game winning streak that nobody saw coming, and you saw that graph that was like 0 to 100 literally very quick, it was figured that Mike Schill was going to get a contract extension. I mean, the Cardinals, like so many other teams, really had to deal with a lot of injuries, but their starting rotation specifically was just decimated. By the middle of June, they had lost Jack Flaherty, who was like their rising ace, like one of the most dynamic pitchers in the game, and 2 other projected opening day starters. And they were essentially down to like 2 starting pitchers for 3 to 4 weeks. And still somehow Mike Schill kept that team together. They go on and do this improbable September. They get bounced in the wild card. But all things considered, it seemed like an extension was going to happen. Now, obviously, there was some fallout between Mike Schill and the front office and president of baseball operations, John Mozeliak. We don't know to what extent, but I will say that it is very fair for Cardinals fans, Reds fans, baseball fans in general, to have some skepticism and some confusion about why the Cardinals fired Mike Schill. Because keep in mind, they did it in such a just an unorthodox way. They fired him on Game 5 of the NLDS playoffs between the Giants and the Dodgers. Now, that is usually a no news day. You know, you have to, if you want to break news and you're a team not in the playoffs right there, not playing that day, you have to ask MLB for explicit permission to make that announcement. So obviously whatever went on was egregious enough for MLB to say, yeah, make that announcement today ahead of what should be all eyes on this big game between 2 historic rivals, right? So they fired him. They let him go. They offered no explanation. Very short notice for the media to even get on the press conference. For example, I was in the Starbucks drive-thru and I got a text and I was like, okay, I don't even have enough time to get my order. Let me pull out. And then they go around and 11 days later, they hire Mike Schultz's right-hand man and Ollie Marmol. For me, and for fans, I think it's completely fair to be skeptical about how can you have philosophical differences between this former manager and then turn to his right-hand man and say that there won't be the same. So it's still a bit of a big kind of confusion. Doesn't make a lot of sense. And there is, well, the Cardinals organization has always kind of believed in Ollie Marmol as being a manager of the future. I don't think it was expected to be this soon, but here we are.
Do you think it's safe to say that the Cardinals had made up their mind before the run that they were going to move on? Or do you think it was more of after the season, it was just something went wrong in their postseason, meetings and discussions?
You know, the Cardinals, we asked John Mozeliak, their president of baseball operations, at the general manager meetings in November. And the answer was no, they were not expecting to make a manager change. They're flying home from Los Angeles after losing the wild card game back to St. Louis for their typical end of season meetings. And they fully expected to go into the offseason without a managerial search. So obviously something happened in that week between them losing the game and those meetings, something that the front office felt like couldn't be ignored, it couldn't be resolved, and ultimately they had to show Mike Schill the door. But it was never their intention to go into 2022, which the front office has long been estimating as their primary season of contention, and have to make a change at the manager seat. That was never part of their plan.
Did you get any sense from any of the players if there was any dissent in that decision, or more indifferent, or anything of that nature?
It was definitely a shock. It happened so suddenly that players were finding out on Twitter or from other reporters trying to confirm, or from just word of mouth. Nobody had any idea that it was coming. I'm not sure if there was a reception of disappointment or anger. Either way, I think it was just kind of confusion, as in why is this happening? You know, as far as the clubhouse was concerned, there was no animosity there. And I think it was alleviated a little bit by bringing in Marmol, who was, knows this clubhouse, works them well. He's young, he's relatable, he's bilingual. He has a great relationship with this clubhouse. So I think that kind of helped ease the questioning. But it still obviously wasn't a great look when the clubhouse is reaching out to each other, to other people in the organization, as all this news is kind of breaking, like, what just happened? But to this organization's credit, they move fast. The Cardinals always have a kind of flair for the dramatics, and I think that they've fully moved on from whatever happened with Mike Schill and are focused on, one, baseball coming back, and two, how this clubhouse is going to push forward, because I think it's pretty obvious that this club is no longer happy with just making the wild card and would like to win the division.
That's fascinating. Certainly, it feels like one of those moves that if it works out, they'll be looking great. If not, yeah, they've definitely set themselves up. So I guess you got to give them credit for sticking to their convictions, because it's definitely a move that can be second guessed. Let's move on and talk a little bit about the team that the Cardinals are, we think, looking to bring into 2022 if we ever start a season, and who knows what'll happen when the lockout does end. If you're watching, here's kind of the projected roster from Fangraphs. Katie, you talked about the rotation. Last year, I was just so stunned that they were able to compete with the rotation, because it was rough at
It
points.
was brutal.
What do you think about the current roster as it stands on January 24th?
I like it. I'll start with the glaring positives of that is that the Cardinals defense figures to once again be one of the best in baseball. They have 5 returning Gold Glovers, 6 nominations that were able to come back. They have a pretty high roster retention rate. I think you saw fantastic signs out of Paul Goldschmidt, Tyler O'Neill, and Harrison Bader, especially towards the end of the season. Dylan Carlson has had a wonderful, true rookie year, though he debuted in that weird 2020 shortened season. I think the factors here are going to be Nolan Arenado. I mean, no one's complaining about the season that he had. I mean, you had over 30 home runs, over 100 RBI, but the average was lower, and he went on the record multiple times and said, I'm not happy with my performance here. So I think if he can adjust to Busch Stadium in his second year and see a little bit higher production, that will be kind of the golden factor. And also, what are the Cardinals going to do at shortstop? Right now, Paul DeJong is projected to start. Edmundo Sosa could slot in. They have Nolan Gorman, who's their top prospect. That's his debut in 2022. Tommy Edman can play all over the field. It's a question of, where does Paul DeJong fit in? Can he bounce back? If the universal DH is brought to the National League, how can they kind of maneuver their lineup there? But for me, the question is the rotation. No one here is really doubting Adam Wainwright at this point, but I know that it is completely fair to say, well, he's going to be 40 years old this season. Are you really relying on a 40-year-old to lead your rotation? The answer to that is partly. They're also relying on a healthy Jack Flaherty, who up until last season has never had any kind of injury history before. That was never been a concern. We saw what he did in 2019 in that second half stunning season that he put on. And then he's not been able to get back there all the way. 2020 wasn't necessarily his fault. That was an anomaly for everybody. 2021, he looked great in the beginning, and those injuries kind of derailed all of that. So the hope is that Wainwright and Flaherty can kind of combine as a 1-2 combo for the aces. Steven Matz, left-hander sinker ball guy, should pair well with that Cardinals defense. He was identified as their primary target in the offseason to get as a free agent. And then you have a couple question marks with Dakota Hudson and Miles Michaelis, both coming off significant injuries. Both showed signs of optimism and better performance towards the end of the year in the regular season when they were able to come back. But of course, Dakota Hudson's coming back from Tommy John. Miles Michaelis has missed the most parts of 2020 and 2021. They're counting on that back in the rotation to stay healthy after those big injuries. It's a little questionable.
You mentioned the defense, and I know Reds fans are sick of me talking about defense, but I feel like that was one of the biggest differences between the Reds and Cardinals this year. It was kind of like the silent killer over the year for the Reds, because the Reds defense wasn't very good, especially in the outfield. As someone who watched the team all year, can you kind of tell us just, what that, does their numbers were through the roof with like outs above average and things like that? What are they actually like in person with their defense?
Well, for the Cardinals, it starts in the spring. Defense and fundamentals have always kind of been emphasized as the team's primary focus. And it was something that even Nolan Arenado didn't understand until he got to the organization. I mean, this is the guy that's won a platinum glove multiple times. He's had a gold glove in every season that he's ever played. It's a guy who knows a lot about defense, right? And during spring training, he remarked to the reporters I think early on in the regular season, that he was stunned at how much the Cardinals practiced like routine defense and fundamentals and these plays. And then one day they won a game based on defensive strategy, defensive positioning, and executing, taking advantage of mistakes on the bases by the opposing team, being shifted correctly, and making these plays that we often take for granted as baseball fans. And he said it clicked. He said, that's why we practice so much. It's emphasized throughout their entire season. Obviously, you want good quality starting pitching. You want a high lethal offense. But when you play at a pitcher stadium like Busch Stadium, you have to rely on the defense to kind of make that more friendly for your pitchers. And I don't think any guy on that team takes defense for granted. It's instilled in them early on in the minor leagues that this is what we emphasize. You have to be good at defense. You have to know your fundamentals, and you can't take plays off. And that's what I think makes them such a good defensive team, is because they take that very seriously.
Yeah, over the course of 162, that's a big difference there, to especially to be a pitching staff that is so young. Because if you've got a defense behind you, that's some of the pressure that's taken off of you as a pitcher. You don't feel like you have to be so fine with everything. You can get away with somebody's power zone hitting in the opposite field when you got two athletes out there that odds are going to run that ball down. And so that's a big deal with a young pitching squad.
Absolutely. And you saw guys even that were older, like John Lester and Jay Happ, credit the defense. I mean, both Lester and Happ, when the Cardinals traded for them, I know we talked about this earlier, it was kind of just like, what? Like, it's 2021, not 2015, in case anyone hasn't looked at a calendar lately. But to their credit, and to the credit of the defense and the Cardinals pitching coach, Mike Maddox, and their staff, both guys were able to reinvent themselves throughout that second half, and both played a direct part in the Cardinals' eventual postseason berth. And when you ask them, especially John Lester, and how he was able to reinvent himself, he gave all the credit to the defense behind him, saying he's much more confident in pitching, knowing if he puts something on the ground, 99% of the time that out's going to be made. So it definitely pays off all around.
Oh, we know how important Lester and Happ were in September. I think the Reds scored like 15 runs off Happ when he was with the Twins earlier in the year, and then he like dominated the Reds in back-to-back starts in September.
September was wild, you guys. It was just wild for everyone involved.
Yeah, I need to hear your part of that. How that run was, that 17-game stretch.
Sometimes I forget that it happened, I think, because it just seems so unreal. You watch them put together a couple games, and they do this all season long. They put together a couple games where they look good, and you'd think, okay, this is it. This is where they finally get it together. Because I had conversations with guys, even when they were playing some of their most dreadful baseball. I said, if you guys honestly think you're going to make the playoffs, let me know. I will continue writing it. But the second that it becomes like kind of a wash and you no longer believe in it, let me know so I can phrase that accordingly. I'm not going to go over here and blindly write that you guys still believe you can make it when your odds, like Adam Wainwright said, were 400% to make the playoffs. But they believed it. They, all season long, they said, no, we have the team, we have the talent, we're going to get hot at the right time, and we're going to make a run. Now, I don't think when they said they were going to make a run that they meant 17 straight games and setting a new franchise record, but that's what they did. And it was just amazing to see, because no matter who they were or who they were playing or where they were at, they won the game doing something differently every single time. I mean, you guys want to talk about September collapses. I think, while the Reds wasn't ideal, at least it wasn't the Padres. I mean, the Padres came to Busch Stadium and the Cardinals made them look like a Little League team, essentially. Like that, I think, truly ended that was the dagger for the Padres. And then they just kept going. It was like the more people said, there's no way they're doing this, the more the team was like, no, we're going to do this. And then they go in, take care of business against the Mets, another team they were facing in the wild card standings, held their own against the Brewers, came back, somehow swept the Cubs, involving this like 20-person double play. No matter what happened, they kept winning, and they did just get hot at the right time. But unfortunately for St. Louis fans, got smothered out real quick as soon as the postseason started.
Carlos, I'm sure you don't know this, Katie. Carlos came up in the Reds minor league system and made the major leagues with the Padres. So what the Cardinals did in September was just like a two swords.
Carlos, they had no respect for you. That's just a double
awful.
Whammy.
I hated that streak. It was like they got to like 10 games and were like, oh, let's check the Cardinals score. I'm sure they're winning. Yep.
It was really strange.
Oh, they're down 4. It's the 7th inning. Hell yeah. Nope, they won that game too.
I had to rewrite a lot of stories. Makes you feel better, Carlos. The first the first major league team I ever covered was the Padres. I spent a year there. I love San Diego, and I was texting the writers there, and I'm still like, what's happening? what's going on? Nobody knew. That was just two complete opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Winning 17 games in a row is insane, but doing it like when you had to. Well, actually, they didn't end up having to. They ended up like clinching with like 4 days left, which was just insane based on where they were like 2 weeks before. Wild. I did want to talk about a guy that I got to admit I really like him, and I know that you wrote a lot of stuff about him. Tyler O'Neill. You said that you think he could emerge as an MVP candidate. I'm with you. I think his ceiling is super high. Tell us more about Tyler O'Neill.
Tyler O'Neill, he's someone that I think kind of always had the potential. 2020, we saw the defense. I mean, he won Gold Glove in 2020 in left field, but it was always how he was more of a two true outcome hitter. He would either home run, strike out. And he really, to his credit, went into 2021 with a focus on being more versatile. This guy is strong as heck. I mean, I think he could like crush my entire head with his biceps. Like, it is unnatural how strong he is. He's also super fast. What he did was kind of refocus his strategy at the plate by emphasizing pitch selection, by being patient, working counts. We saw better pitch selection, and he really emphasized that throughout the season. And what I liked about Tyler was he wasn't afraid to make these mistakes and endure the growing pains, and it actually sped up his maturation throughout the game, I think. So he was able to be that September hero the Cardinals needed. I think of Tyler O'Neill as a centerpiece of the future, kind of like how I think Jonathan India for the Reds. He's a guy that's easy to root for. He's entertaining, and the ceiling is really high, like India. And I think it's almost like opposing fan bases want to dislike this guy because he does damage against their team, but they can't because he's entertaining. Like that video that circled with Jonathan India at the Cincinnati football game, where he was really cool, talking to a kid and making sure he has season tickets or to whatever game he wants. Cardinals fans were like, oh man, wish I could hate that guy, but I can't. And I think that's kind of the effect that Tyler O'Neill has throughout the division. Really exciting guy if you're the Cardinals, very threatening guy if you're a division opponent.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with that assessment. Katie, before we get you out of here, tell us, do you have any sort of pulse on what the Cardinals might do if this lockout ever ends? I think you wrote about maybe looking for more bullpen pieces. I know there was a report that came out that they weren't in on any of the top shortstops. What's kind of your pulse as we hopefully get towards the spring training here at some point?
Yeah, the Cardinals were never going to fork over the amount of money necessary to land one of those top premier shortstops because they didn't necessarily need to. Their biggest need was starting pitching, which they think they locked up with Steven Matz. I could make the argument that they need a little bit more, but I'm not in the front office. What you saw for guys like Corey Seager, what you're going to see for guys like Trevor Story is just not something that the Cardinals were going to put up. They prefer to operate conservatively. I don't want to say cheaply because they do spend money. This is not a penny pinching organization by any means, but especially from the free agent market historically, they've really kind of operated incrementally, conservatively, and trying to find small additions to boost the team. That's why I think whenever this lockout is over, potentially when/if, they'll put more of a focus on relief pitching. They still need pitching depth. That was identified early on in November, whether it was starting pitching or relief pitching as things that they needed. So I think they'll make a play on that relief pitcher market. That's a market that we saw that was pretty slow before the lockout. There wasn't a lot of circling in or checking in on relief pitchers because that market just was kind of, I think, looked at the industry as something that could wait. It was kind of lock up these big free agents in this frenzy. Now, I expect the same kind of frenzy to happen once this lockout ends, because you'll have such a limited time for all these front offices to make decisions on how they're going to bolster their roster. Because, I mean, we know how this is going to go, right? Lockout's going to end. And it's going to be like, okay, surprise, you have like 7 days to get to spring training. Everybody go. So you're going to see this like big frenzy of moves as people and organizations try to sign players to bolster their roster. I believe the Cardinals will be in on that, but I think it'll be more relief pitching, maybe some bench depth if the universal DH comes, but I don't think they'll be in play for any major free agents.
Man, you beat writers, you guys are gonna get zero sleep
I
once the
know.
lockout ends. From then until like halfway through spring training.
It's going to be nonstop. That's why I keep trying to say, like, enjoy this moment, because as soon as baseball comes back, it's always like 0 to 100. It's never, let me just ease into this. It's like we're going to get slammed, and that's okay.
Yeah,
And maybe by like May, we'll have some sort of a semblance again, just in time for like the trade deadline and then that wild, September baseball. Very
yeah.
toxic
You're not
cycle.
gonna get a little spring training to get ready for the season, and they're
No.
like, "Oh, I think I'll write something today." Nope.
Yeah. The best part about spring training, it's like it's supposed to be a warm up, and we're not going to
Yeah.
get that.
Mm-mm.
Not even close.
One last question for you. I'm asking everyone that comes on. In Cincinnati, we've seen a real turn in the last couple years against ownership. And I'm curious about each of the other teams in the division. What's the general sense that you have from Cardinals fans? And I'm not talking about the the bipolar ones. I'm talking the more, rational, semi-rational fans. How do Cardinals fans approach ownership? What's their thoughts on the current ownership group for the Cardinals?
That's funny because we've just ran a survey and the results will be out this week about how Cardinals fans feel about the state of the franchise. And the ownership was a big comment section. I think Cardinals fans know that they have it relatively well when you look at franchises in the history of St. Louis. For example, the exact number is slipping me, but I don't think the Cardinals have had a losing streak under John Mozeliak's tenure as general manager / president of baseball operations in 14 years. They are consistently competitive. They are consistently in the playoff conversations, even when they shouldn't be, like we saw last year. They know that they have it much better than organizations like, not to pull anyone out, but like the Orioles or the Rockies or something like that. If you're a fan of those teams, I'm sorry, I feel you. Now, they also know that they can still be, and believe me, they are tense and maybe a little bit frustrated that the Cardinals haven't been able to advance to the World Series in a decade. Now, that sounds a little laughable when you are a fan base of other teams. You're like, seriously? It's only been 10 years. But this is well, in this case, it's been 12 since they've won. The Cardinals, I think, are a little bit more, since Cardinals fans are so used to their organization winning, they can act a little bit more strongly. They know they have it good with ownership. It's that it's not as excellent was the biggest answer I got, was this is a great franchise, but it can't be excellent without a ring. Cardinals haven't had a ring since 2011. Now, coming from both sides of the spectrum, I can see where Cardinals fans are disappointed by that and frustrated. They're used to competing consistently. They're used to doing better than a wild card first round elimination. That does not mean fans like the Pirates are going to understand where they're coming from. So I 100% see both sides. I think, to wrap it up, Cardinals fans are satisfied with ownership and how the team is run, but are growing antsy because it has been, in their defense, nearly 10 years since the Cardinals went to the World Series.
I can just hear half of our listeners
I
screaming at
know,
the monitor right now,
I
punching the
know,
screen. Oh, bleep,
and
bleep,
it's
bleep.
justified. It's justified. I hear you. I'm not saying you're wrong. I get it. I grew up a Giants fan, and it was rough out there for a really long time. And then they won 3 World Series, and then called it a day. But I get it. I understand the pain. I do.
All right, real quick. I'm sorry, I got one more thing.
That's fine.
Um, the Cardinals top prospects, they got pipeline. I know the Athletic has your own version as well. Any prospects that you see? I know Gorman and Libator are both really close that could have a major impact here in 2022.
Yeah, those are the 2 guys. That's part of the reason why the Cardinals are so optimistic about 2022, is their top 2 prospects are coming up. I would imagine we see Nolan Gorman before we see Matthew Liberatore, just because I think there'll be a bigger need for Gorman, especially if there is a DH. And Liberatore is he's their top pitching prospect. If something happens to the rotation, they're going to want Liberatore to slot in, but not until he's ready. I do not think they're going to rush either of these guys up until they're absolutely ready. That's how highly they think of these young guys. Fun fact, they're actually also best friends from high school. And now they're like the top 2 prospects in the organization. But yeah, those are the 2 that I would pick that are going to make an impact at some point in 2022. If I had to pick a time frame for when they debut, I'd say around midsummer.
Fantastic. Well, Katie, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your insight. And where can people find you who who want to keep up with your work and how you cover the team, and what are you working on the rest of the off season?
It's a great question. I just kind of wait for the ideas to come to me. We're gonna do some fun like roster construction, the pros and cons of like the starting rotation, of if there's going to be a DH, stuff like that. We've been doing a lot of collaborations on The Athletic, where you can find my work, theathletic.com/MLB, theathletic.com/Cardinals, and on Twitter at KDJWoo. That's my @. Yeah, it's a weird time to be a baseball fan and a baseball writer, but I like to think of myself as an eternal optimist, and hopefully we will have more things to talk about soon.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. We'll let you get out of here. Best of luck on covering the team. We won't say best of luck on the Cardinals, but
I understand.
We wish you the best personally and professionally.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Bye, Katie. Thanks.
Bye.
All right. Well, that was Katie Woo. Really cool to hear her takes on the Cardinals and kind of where they stand as we hopefully get towards a baseball season. And Branch, thanks for the comment. I agree. We really appreciated Katie taking the time to come on and talk about the Cardinals. We hope you're enjoying this series. Not sure if Reds fans are. We figured this was better than, like, I don't know, ranking our top 10 moments or whatever the heck else we could do, the rest of this off season. But let's talk. There is a little bit of baseball news today. MLB lockout. They finally, the MLB and the Players Association finally met today. Basically, long story short, the players are willing to give up free agency being moved sooner, which sounds like a pretty big concession. They are meeting again tomorrow, which is good. I mean, 2 days in a row is, at least a start of something. But there was definitely some tension, as I'm sure you would expect from the reports. And one of the real interesting that caught my eye was a report that MLB owners made it apparent that they don't care if the season gets delayed, or at least kind of gave that stance. Hopefully that's a posture. I don't know, Carlos, what do you think about, some of the news that we saw? You have any sort of optimism from it?
I wouldn't say I don't think there's really much optimism to be gained from what happened today. But I was watching the MLB Network earlier, and Mad Dog Russo was talking about how the owners don't care if they lose these April games because they don't make money in April. It's too cold usually for most teams to fill the stands, and it's the beginning of the season, and their sports are winding down. And that's something I never thought about, but which makes total sense, which the players, they want to get their 162 games in. So, the owners are okay with missing games in April, I believe. And I had never thought of it that way. And it makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah. It's the thing that I find interesting is if they're giving up the getting to free agency quicker, does that maybe make the Jonathan Indias and the younger players kind of like, hey, you know what's in it for us holding out, much longer? Do they start putting more pressure on, the guys that are more established that kind of want, different things? I wonder if that kind of changes the mindset. And, I mean, definitely Cincinnati makes a lot of money on opening day. After that, I don't know. There's a lot of empty stadiums. I mean, they're still going to lose money on TV, though. The TV contracts are going to be, I would assume, be prorated.
Yeah,
and that's still a major moneymaker. I mean, I know in Cincinnati, it's typically the number 1 or number 2 television show in Cincinnati every night, any night of the season. So I don't know. It's the thing that really stinks is just, as we talked about spring training is like, these places, especially out in Arizona, like that rely on this income. 2020, they had their spring training cut short. 2021, it wasn't a real spring training. I mean, they didn't have nearly the amount of fans coming out because a lot of people didn't want to travel. And then, they were hoping, hey, 2022 be, a big revenue will get back. And no one's booking tickets to fly out to Arizona right now because they have no idea when this thing's going to start. The outside consequences of this is really what I think stinks the most is, all these people that make a living, off of baseball and writing about baseball and all this stuff. And that's just, man, that's what really I think stinks the most about this.
Yeah, well, it's the business part that nobody likes to talk of, and we got to do it every 4 years, so
Yeah,
or whatever it is. However, CBA, I forget what it is, 4 or 5.
I think it's 6. I hope to God it's 6. I hope.
Is it 6?
I don't know.
I don't
I hope. I'm afraid. That this is going to be the norm every however many years it is. I'm afraid it's going to be like the NBA's like this, I believe, where they're always, lockouts or threatening of lockouts. I would hope that we could get back at some point, but and you keep doing this every couple years. It's bad for the brand. It really is. And speaking of the brand, nice little transition there. The Reds, I tell you what, for team that's in a league that's in a lockout right now. It's pretty hard to brand your players, but Jonathan India and Tyler Stevenson. I'm not going to rehash the Jonathan India story because everyone at this point knows it. But how cool was that? And Tyler Stevenson, jumping on the Bengals bandwagon. I think it's really cool that these guys have really embraced Cincinnati, and we haven't seen this with every player. So there's certainly been a lot of players throughout the years that have, but to have like the two young, cornerstone pieces of your team really embracing the city, I just think it's really cool. What are your thoughts about, kind of how they're marketing themselves? And right now, I mean, they are literally the only thing marketing players in Cincinnati right now.
I mean, I think it's cool. I think it's just a way of the times now. Like, Twitter is, everybody has a Twitter. I mean, probably most kids in middle school have a Twitter account. It's what they grew up doing. It's just their way of, just showing that they're behind them, and hopefully, whenever the Reds are in the playoffs this year, they can get the support from Joey B and Chase and the boys, which will be cool. It's just something to get excited about. I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah. Last piece of news of the week, robot umpires are coming to AAA. I think anyone who's followed me for a week knows that I am in support of robot umpires. So I am very excited about this. It feels like maybe it's finally getting close. Long overdue. Carlos, what's your thoughts on robot umpires in AAA?
It seems like that's pretty quick to get there already, with so many like negative things being said about it, with with breaking balls and stuff like that. But for it to be at AAA, that means this thing's coming pretty soon. I mean, I think I'm in favor of having robo umps, something to quit missing so many calls, like important calls, especially to get in a consistent strike zone. And I don't know. I'm not against it. I'm not totally for it. I'd probably say I'm like 60-40, something like that, and then maybe 10% undecided.
What do you think it would be?
That's an old dad joke right there for you, Nick.
What do you think it would be like being a pitcher that pitches in AAA and you have the robot umps, and then you get called up? And I saw someone talking about, like there's a lot of players that get shuffled back and forth like all year. Like, how would you adjust to that?
I don't really think you can do anything other than just pitch your normal game. I mean, if you're going to be getting used to robo umps, then I don't know. You just got to hang with them. There's no really. I don't think a pitcher's going to go into one game to the next unless there's some sort of like loophole, like we're talking about breaking balls, that they can take advantage of. I don't think they're going to have a different mindset on what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to be pitches that are called different, because with the row bottoms is going to be very straightforward, and certain calls that are technically strikes that get called balls all the time, like aren't, and that's going to be a wild adjustment. Kind of as we.
I can't wait until like just a pitch doesn't register. Like somebody throws like a 98-mile-an-hour sinker and it catches like the outer third, and there's no signal if it's a strike or a ball, and everybody's like looking back at the ump. He's like,
I'm
"Oh."
assuming the ump has to like be locked into every pitch as like the backup or the fall man. I don't know. Maybe they maybe they would go to replay. I guess that's something kind of to see how that gets ironed out in
Oh yeah,
AAA
that
when
would be
that
so
does.
awesome. Go to replay every other
Yeah,
pitch.
go to replay for a ball or strike. I would assume it's just the umpire, and if it doesn't come through in 5 seconds, their call is it, and that's it. Yeah, you could have some wild, controversy is always good for the sport. Well, Mr. Carlos, do you have any other parting words of wisdom before we get out of here tonight?
No, I really don't have a whole lot to say right now. Be a fun matchup football wise for the city of Cincinnati. I think I'm going to go for the Bengals this weekend.
All right,
Jump on the bandwagon.
there you go. Carlos is on. Who day? Yeah, so next week we will be back. We're going to do the Pirates preview, and then the week after that we got the Brewers. And then hopefully we are inching towards spring training, and we'll start getting some real news to talk about. But if you haven't, make sure you are subscribed to us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, iHeart, wherever. We're on just about everything. And if we're not on something, let me know, and I'll get us up on there. Give us a rate, review. 5 stars would be appreciated. If you don't like the show, just leave it alone. No one needs your negative comments. And as always, we are sponsored by Bet Online, so go check them out. Until next time, go Reds
And Bengals.
and Bengals.